Welcome to Genpres. It's a weekly podcast that I, Tom Carstensen, run in Denmark. Normally it's in Danish, but I've decided to make an English version because it's about Football Lads Alliance. And this is such an English and, perhaps in time, international phenomenon, so I think it deserves a wider audience that doesn't turn it off when I start babbling in Danish. Welcome to Genpres, visiting London, presented by NordicBet. I have travelled to London to look closer into the group Football Lads Alliance. First, a bit about myself and why I decided to do this podcast. I'm a Danish journalist who've lived in London and Ireland for many years and covered English football for a number of Danish outlets. I specialise in football fan culture, and I've written a Danish book about Danish and international hooligans and casual culture. I also specialise in nationalist movements, and I have a book on the way on that. Football Lads Alliance is, in my opinion, not a particular nationalist movement. It's a movement of protest against what a growing number of Englishmen see as a lack of action by the government towards extremism and terror. The FLA, as it's dubbed, is a unification of football fans, lads from all over England. A number of these fans are from the harder parts of the football fan culture, and yes, there are hooligans amongst them. Lads that would normally not be standing together, but the attacks on Westminster, Manchester and London Bridge have changed this. In the latest attack, 2 Millwall fans became famous for standing up against the cowardly attackers, one of them famous for shouting, "Fuck off" on Millwall. I'm in front of the pub Barrowboy and Banker at London Bridge, a pub I know very well. I arrange football trips to Millwall matches for Danish fans, and this is where we normally have our breakfast and a pint. Yes, Danes also like a pint for breakfast when abroad. And here, 10 feet left of the pub, where punters normally stand and have a cigarette, is where the terrorists slammed their car into the fence. Then they ran down onto Borough Market and attacked pubs. In one of these pubs, the knife-wielding bastards, I'll be honest and call them, the market porter, I meet Anthony Circuit, a Wimbledon fan. He joined the FLA shortly after its birth. Anthony, why did you join the FLA?
The reason I joined the FLA was with all the incidents in the UK that have been happening over the last few months, I felt that the mainstream political parties were not doing anything and paying any action lip service, and I felt that the only way was for a group of normal people to come together and actually make a stand, by rather than just sitting on your arse, actually get off, and do something in the public eye. So the FLA seemed like the obvious reason, the obvious thing to do. People the same as me, like-minded, like to go to watch football on a Saturday, getting together as one, with no reason other than to oppose what is happening on our own streets.
You say normal people.
Yeah.
There is obviously in this group also what some people would call non-normal people, like hard hooligans basically. Yeah. How do you feel about going into a group with them?
I think that it just showed that on the day, didn't matter whether there was people there who were known to the police or unknown to the police. Everyone behaved the same. Everyone was united in the cause. Everyone understood why we were there, and behaved accordingly. So it just proved that these people, although obviously on a Saturday they might have different motives, in terms of how they thought about terrorism, it was exactly the same as me. They've had enough. So in that sense, to me, they're normal people. Do you know what I mean? They're thinking the same way as me. They're not blaming any one religion or group. It's just they're blaming the actions of a few, and it has to stop. And I've got my own ideas as to what the government should do in terms of stopping it.
Well, tell me about that. What do you personally want the government to do?
Well, I think that if we've all heard about the watch lists that cost the government millions of pounds to keep these people under 24-hour surveillance. I just cannot understand why these people are allowed to roam freely in our country when we know they're of that persuasion. and if they want to watch this, something should be done about that.
What should be done? I mean, it's allowed to think whatever thoughts you want as long as you don't do the actions, isn't it? It's a democracy.
But they must have reason for having them on a watch list. They must have a reason. Every time one of these attacks happens, generally speaking, they're known to the police, aren't they?
So what do you want the police, or not the police, because they have to abide by whatever the politicians decide, of course. What would you like? Would you like them to put them intern them, whatever? What do you want?
Well, I think the citizenship should be taken away immediately. You know, generally speaking, most of them have gained UK citizenship of some sort. That should be revoked.
And then what?
Deported to whatever country that they're aligned to.
But what about some of them are born here and probably has never had a different citizenship? What would you do with them?
Then, well, I suppose it's more of a case of actually finding out exactly on each case, you know, how much evidence we have against them. I think, as most people think, we've got more than, you know, is necessary to have some sort of conspiracy attached to them. The laws need to be changed. They need to be harsher if anyone is suspected of that. So, I mean, that's what needs to happen, basically, to allow us to take these people in.
You're a football fan.
Yeah.
English football fans are being, by the authorities, treated, in my opinion, roughly. There are measurements put in place that they wouldn't put in place towards other groups of people. Yeah. Is this something that you think about, that you're a football fan and you're looking at these guys who are potential terrorists? Are you kind of comparing how people are being treated?
I think that's a massive reason. Like, for instance, if England are playing in a championship in, like, for instance, in Russia next year, they can stop fans going because of a record that they've got. Whereas they don't seem to be able to control our borders when it comes to these people returning from Syria. There was just a misbalance of that. You know, if someone has gone to fight for Syria, they should not be allowed to return. Whereas we don't seem to be able to stop them. We know if you can stop someone who's been drunk inside a football stadium, which obviously is an offence, and you can stop them going to Russia, surely you can stop someone who's been fighting jihadi in Syria. That to me, that's just mad. That there's an imbalance there. So yeah, football fans are second-class citizens. So in that respect, it's good that these people came together, in particular, to say, look, hang on a minute, what are you doing? You know, it's just wrong in my book.
And when you were there, what did you take notice of in relation to different fans who were there? Was there something you thought, wow, this is something?
I think as soon as we got to London Bridge Station, we met about 50 Leeds fans who had travelled down for the day. And that's at that point I thought, because at the time I thought it'd just be London-based supporters. But there was, as I say, straight away we met these 50 Leeds fans who were down, having a chat with them. They were there for the same reason. As we got closer to St Paul's, where the march was starting, you realise how big it was. And just talking to general fans of the day, who, you know, I'm sure had, you know, on a Saturday they'd be different people. You know, they'd normally be looking, you know, for the West Hams and the Millwalls, but their only thought was about uniting against terrorism, and it completely.
So there were fans there from different teams who would, if they'd met on a Saturday at a game, have beaten the shit out of each other. Yes,
100%, and I think you could sense in the police eyes they couldn't believe that this would go off quietly. They were expecting at any moment a flashpoint between two mobs, or, you know, someone with rivalries from previous Saturdays or whatever it might be. But that never happened at all. In fact, it was the complete opposite. Towards the end of the speeches, and the march set off, you sort of thought, there's not many Millwall here. And it was only after a few minutes into the march, when we arrived at Cannon Street Station, that, I don't know, there must have been 1,000 Millwall were waiting at Cannon Street. and they waited for the march to come to them rather than them to join the march. It was like more symbolic than anything, and the West Ham fans on the march clapped the Millwall fans, and they clapped back, and that was just a bit. Hang on a minute, this is bigger than anything before. It just showed that the strength of the united front that they were showing for the basis of being against racism, terrorism. Was bigger than any rivalry.
Those two fans groups would normally murder each other if they get away with it.
100%.
What did you mean about symbolic that they were waiting?
Don't know. I think it was just a sort of show of strength. Because obviously people were walking into the march, joining the march at 12 o'clock like they should, and they were trickling in until it reached the big numbers. But the Millwall fans actually were organised enough to get everyone together at a certain point and join it en masse. So it was more like we're here, and it was. But also it showed that when the march met up with the Millwall, it showed that there was a united front. Normally, obviously, Millwall are, no one likes us type of thing. But actually, on this march, it was just all together. And that was the first time I thought, oh, this is brilliant, this is. And that's when I knew it could get bigger and bigger.
So this is a group that fights extremism. It's not a group that fights Muslims or Islam.
Not at all. I think there was a call in the marches in particular that, more should be done in terms of the communities condemning the acts. No more paying lip service. They need to do more to prove that they also are united against extremism. But I mean, there was different communities on that march. The Sikh community came out, and it wasn't against. I didn't feel that it was against a religion.
So there were, to be frank, non-white people there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and obviously that was something that I'm sure the march organisers wanted to show. That anyone can join this march. It's not just, I think it's, women and men can join the march. I think they want it to be, we want the country to be united, and not to think this is just another right-wing group.
In your view, it's not a right-wing group.
100%. I think that organisations like Antifa want to brand it like that because that's easy. That's easy for them to do that, and I think the reason they do that is because they're scared. They're actually scared that this group is the Middle England coming out and saying we've had enough, and that could be far bigger than any group because, it's Middle England is going to be the biggest group. So
you mentioned Antifa. So if the Antifa decided to attack this group of people, how would that pan out?
I think it's important for the authorities to make sure that doesn't happen, first of all, because the only reason that Antifa would do that would be to create a reaction that is similar to what they get with the EDL, which is not going to be good for our group. I think it's important for the FLA to show, the people on the march of the FLA to show restraint if that happens. Because although I know what they should deserve if Antifa do that, I think it's important for the people on that march on the FLA to realise the long-term consequences of reacting to them. And I think that the march is bigger than that. And I think that if the organisers continue to keep, if they keep on delivering the message that this is a peaceful march, and I think it's important as well for them to say it's possible that Antifa may try to get a reaction from us, and they actually deal with that head on and prepare people on the march for that, and to ask for restraint. which, because I know the Antifa are capable of causing problems, wearing their masks, throwing bottles, spitting, things like that. I've seen it on other, before. So I think it's important that they show restraint, basically.
Thank you, Anthony, for your time.
The first demonstration FLA held gathered 10,000 people, but British media largely remained silent and ignored it. They did, however, find time and space in the papers to write about 50 guys from the imploded English Defence League that also demonstrated that day. The FLA's Facebook group has more than 62,000 members, and it's a secret group you need to be invited into, so it's quite astonishing. The next demonstration is in central London on the 7th of October. To learn more, Anthony Circuit has put me in touch with the founder of FLA, John Megan, who I'll now go and meet. Welcome back to Genpres, a podcast about football, normally in Danish, this time in English, due to the subject. It's presented by NordicBet. And perhaps I should explain what Genpres means. It's a word that means Gegenpress from Germany, which is a type of football where all the players kind of attack. Basically, when you lose the ball, you put the pressure back on. And that is kind of what the Football Lads Alliance is trying to do, to put pressure on the British authorities when it comes to battling extremism and terror. I'm meeting John Megan, the founder of FLA, and a Spurs fan in a pub at Baker Street.
Why did you start this movement?
Well, I started it because, after London Bridge, obviously, a few weeks before that, there was a lot of killings in Manchester. Having young children myself, was a kind of it really hit home when I see children getting killed innocently in Manchester, and with London Bridge being so soon after that, it was almost like a kind of enough is enough, and something had to be done. I'm forever on social media, like all my friends, and people talk and talk about how we're going to do things and go out and make representation when things happen, but it never happened. So I took the step, and here we are today.
And what difference is it going to make that a bunch of football fans and among them hooligans are getting into this political movement?
Well, you just said it. Hooligans. The bringing together of rival clubs and groups. It's making a big statement. It's making a statement to the government to say that obviously, if we can kind of get our act together and be united, then why can't the government and show some solidarity? And that's what the FLA is. It's showing a sense of solidarity to kind of make representation. It's bringing out the kind of the heart and the fight of the British spirit, which we're all about. But people have kind of just hidden away from it for some time because people haven't wanted to. People have wanted to stand up. There's been talk about it, but like I said, no one took a step forward, and that's where I come into it.
Isn't there a contradiction in a group involving an extreme group, which hooligans would be regarded from outsiders, demonstrating against other extremists? Wouldn't it be shouldn't the extremists in the hooligan movement stop fighting first before they started pointing fingers?
Well, this is the thing. I think there's two things to look at here. Football hooliganism in England is on a decline. And it's been on decline for a number of years. A lot of people that I'm kind of been talking to since the FLA started are kind of, either retired or semi-retired, what you call football hooligans lads. People aren't really interested in getting involved anymore because the seriousness of getting involved with football, the consequences are prison, and people kind of have, particularly the older generation of football lads have got too much to risk. Another kind of thing to look at is what we need to focus on here is that through that kind of platform that I just talked about of that kind of hooligans who are no longer in the game or semi-retired, it's given an opportunity to make something of those people and to bring them almost back to the fore. These are people who kind of lost a bit of interest probably because us football fans, football's our life, and particularly lads. When you don't meet up with your mates on a Saturday, what are you going to do? So the FLA, that's where the FLA comes in. Still meet up with your mates, and you can make real representation for something which matters, which to a lot of these people is their families, and really putting together a united front to say to the government enough's enough.
Is this a violent movement?
No, it's peaceful. Our first march on the 24th of June showed what we're about. It showed, what we had. Within 3 weeks of forming a group, we had 10,000 people march on the streets of London. In comparison, I don't really want to go too much into it, but the EDL had 50 people marching the same day. The thing about it is that we've just caught the imagination of the people. You've got people who have got violent past, people that have got colourful past, but what you've got is you've got people who really aren't interested in that now. People who are just interested in, marching and making a statement. And for me, since starting this, the statement can be made is large numbers of people, a mass movement of people. Of people who probably would be frowned upon by the government and kind of the local authority, the police and whatnot. But now it's an opportunity to show that we are different. Football fans, football lads, or because even football fans have got a bad name in England, as being quite loutish. It's change, and it's something which we're gonna really take forward.
But let me ask you: so, is this a right? Is this not? You don't see this as a right-wing movement?
No, I mean obviously we've been sort of challenged with that kind of question from day one, because I think the problem is the stigma of football fans, particularly football lads. There's some sort of kind of people try to kind of correlate us with the EDL, and we've made it clear from day one that we're nothing like that. We're not in any way associated with the EDL. We have one kind of objective, and that is to kind of challenge the situation of extremism, and really make representation for the families and those who families of those who have lost their lives and those who have been seriously injured.
So how are you different from the EDL? Because if you ask them, they said they were challenging extremism. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that we've really tried to kind of separate ourselves from far right groups and keep out people who've got real extreme views. We don't want our focus just to be on one form of extremism, Islamic extremism. We want to focus on all forms of extremism. Extremism breeds extremism. So if you've got a guy who's going to attack people outside a mosque, or you've got a terrorist group who's going to attack people in a street, on a bridge, for example, they're both as bad as each other. One's a group and one's an individual, but they're both extreme. So that's why we're different. We're focusing on kind of the broader picture.
What's your own background in this?
Well, obviously, look, my past. I've been over the years. I've got involved at football, got myself in a bit of trouble over the years. For me, I'm looking to do something different now. Still go to football, still take my kids, still have pals over there. But for me, it's getting a real. It's something. It's another buzz now. A lot of us football lads, we have a buzz. And our buzz is probably either going in the ground and getting that last minute winner, or having a scrap with a rival group. The reality is that there's something else now. There's something else. There's another purpose in life. I've got 3 kids. I've got a family. One, I don't want to risk that, but also as well, more than that, I want to make sure that there's something for them. I want to make sure they've got a future, and there's a real opportunity to kind of create what we've created a movement. I mean, we've got a monster on our hands here. We've got something which has grown from me starting up a Facebook group to 62,000 people in the space of a number of weeks. So it's only going from strength to strength.
So obviously you acknowledge there are people in the FLA that are football hooligans. Do you think that's going to be a problem for you in your group?
No, I don't think it's going to be a problem, because what you have is you have all different groups. So you have different clubs. You've got people who are kind of almost the head of each club, who's kind of keeping their fans in check and making sure that they're well oiled and they're on side with what we're trying to achieve. I mean, what people need to realise is, like I said, without statistically looking into it, the average age between 45 and 50, I would say, in this group, because there's been some small polls done on some of our local groups, and that's been proven. And like I said, I mean, the older generation want change, so people aren't interested in living that 80s kind of style. People want to just get on with it and march peacefully now. And like I said, it's giving people another lease of life.
It sounds nearly like a hippie song. People hanging up the Stanley knife and then all becoming friends again.
Well, don't get me wrong. Look, when Saturday comes, I mean, we'll still be rivals. When Tottenham play Chelsea, when West Ham play Millwall, when Man United play Man City, look, there's still going to be a rivalry there. Football's a passionate game. Fans are passionate people. That's never going to go away. You're never going to get rid of that. But what you're going to see is you're probably going to see a decline in football hooliganism as a consequence of the FLA. Look, we didn't set out to achieve that. We set out to kind of really make a statement on extremism and try and get a government to sit up. But as this has developed, what you've seen kind of rival groups working together collaboratively, because everyone wants the same, basically. I mean, at the end of the day, football people are the same. The only difference is we support different teams. In a broader picture of society, what's more important? Having a fight at football, or really making change, and trying to prevent people getting killed. To me, it's a no-brainer. So most people are on board. You're always going to have people who are resistant to that, and we'll have to kind of cross those bridges as we come to them. But the reality is, we've managed to build something which is positive. It's full of energy, full of life, and it's going to go from strength to strength.
Welcome back to this podcast presented by NordicBet. I'm speaking to the founder of Football Lads Alliance, John Meehan.
John, what is it you want with this? What do you want the government to do? What are you demonstrating for to happen?
Well, look, I mean, if you kind of look at a lot of the attacks in London, it's pretty clear that there was lessons that could be learned. We want the government to acknowledge that kind of, they're going to make changes. We want the government to acknowledge that, stuff like, I've talked about it for a long time, but control orders, making sure that, that people that they're aware of are actually being, watched and being monitored. I mean, a good example I always make is football fans. If you're on a football ban order in the UK, you have to hand your passport in. You're restricted from going within, a certain radius of football grounds. Why? And some of those are civil orders, some of them are not even criminal orders. So, if someone's under suspicion, like football lads are, why can't they follow that same path with suspected terrorists?
How big do you think this can become?
Well, glad you asked that, because I mean, like I said, within 3 weeks we achieved 30,000 people on our Facebook group. it's a secret group as well. So there's some credit is due there, because it's a very tight group. After the march, we had about another 27,000. It's slowed up a bit now, but that was the same. It's followed the same pattern as prior to the first march. There'll be a kind of a natural increase after the next march, providing it goes to plan. I was talking to someone the other day, saying that at some point we're going to have to move off of the Facebook platform, because the group's going to be too big. We're going to have to look at either making our own social media platform, or creating a forum, or working in a different environment, because it won't be fit for purpose. I mean, we've got FLA across the UK at the minute, Scotland, Wales. We've got interest from a lot of expats, so people that have left the UK to live in Europe and the rest of the world. People in Australia who have created an FLA Australia. People in New Zealand, Thailand, Spain. What we're fortunate is a lot of English clubs have got associations with clubs in Europe, so we've got that link there straight away. And look, at the end of the day, this is a common problem across Europe. Extremism is something which we're all suffering. So why not raise it on the national stage? Raise it on the kind of the big stage. I mean, what we're looking at is doing more marches across the UK, maybe moving that into Europe with the football kind of approach. We've got teams who are in the Champions League, we've got international games, so we could look to meet up with other clubs and do one big super march across Europe. There's lots of plans, lots of excitement, and it's definitely not the end, it's just the start.
Describe the first demonstration. How was that?
Well, obviously, it was quite surreal, really. I wasn't expecting those numbers. When we originally arranged to meet at St Paul's Cathedral itself, but in the weeks leading up to the march, the police kind of decided to change the plan a little bit, and we ended up meeting in a road adjacent to there, which meant that it was a bit disjointed, because we didn't want to tell people to meet in a different location, which was a stone's throw away from the original location. So what ended up happening when we had the speeches, it looked like there was 3,000, maybe 5,000 in attendance. It looked pretty decent. And then when we got up to Cannon Street with St Paul's in the backdrop, but probably about half a mile up the road from St Paul's, when you look back, it was just like a sea of people. It was quite surreal. It was quite unbelievable. I couldn't sleep that night after, and the days after that I was quite buzzing. I talked about a buzz. I really got a buzz out of it, because it was a shock to the system. And it went like a dream. It couldn't have went any better. I played, like I've said, to a few people, there was a lot of scenarios that were going through my head leading up to it. There was a lot of different groups involved, football groups. There was a potential of far right and left extremist groups trying to infiltrate. There was also the risk of the police and what tactics they might bring to the table. But thankfully, everything went well. Everyone played their part, and it's made it what it is today, because that was a catalyst to kind of propel it to where it is. And then after the next march on the 7th of October, all being well, it will then just grow beyond belief, because you'll get your kind of everyday person interested in what we're doing, not just people involved in football.
You mentioned the police. How was the relationship with the police on the day? Because obviously there were parts of this group that are not loving the police, and vice versa.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie. I mean, look, being a football lad, normally you play a game of cat and mouse with the police. Normally it's the police v us. Us being the group. But going into this march and the preparation, the lead into the march. I mean, for me, it was all about if we're going to be a success here, we need them on side, and we need them to kind of be willing to support us, not create an issue. Police and football groups have a history of clashing. The police are doing their job to keep the peace, so to speak. and football lads, they've got, we're out there to kind of get at the opposing group. But we made it clear with the police, look, don't cause any unnecessary issues. Let us walk. We'll walk peaceful. Don't kind of antagonise, film. Don't treat us like football fans. Just treat us like normal people. Don't treat us like football lads. Treat us like normal people. They kept to their side of the bargain, and it went really well. Like I said, it couldn't have went any better. One arrest for an unrelated offence. So that says it all.
Did anything surprise you? There are some groups there that would not normally love each other. Millwall, West Ham, Spurs, Chelsea. How did they interact?
One thing for me was what was interesting was when we left the pub that we were drinking in near Liverpool Street, the Tottenham group, we walked down to St Paul's, and when we got near to St Paul's, there was a massive group of, what say massive, we had about 500, there was probably about 200 of them standing in the corner. I believe they were Chelsea, Millwall, and they obviously, when we crossed the roads, they clapped us, so that just showed, I think that was the turning point in all of this. We went from being kind of quite nervous and worried to actually feeling that there's a sense of kind of respect for one another for turning up and playing a part, because that's what it's about really. The FLA is an alliance. It's in the word, Football Lads Alliance. It's about coming together. What people do after the 7th of October, what people did after the 24th of June, that's very much up to them. But on that day, there was a real kind of message from the FLA to come, be peaceful, play your part, and just join us in a massive what I call a landmark occasion, because it was. I think the police thought that maybe things might occur. Everyone kind of thought that, but the reality was that it never materialised, which it's made the FLA today. It's made it what it is.
So what is it you want? I mean, what is it you want the government to do?
First and foremost, we want to create something which is really huge. We already have. We want to keep growing it. We want to keep putting mass numbers on the street. We don't want to march. I've said this to a lot of people. We don't want to march. We want government action. We want the government to acknowledge there's a problem. We want the government to take action and do more to kind of weed out terrorist groups, to stop terrorists from travelling between countries, when they're obviously going to training camps, to take more of a lead on people that they're aware of, like I said before. It does feel that after all these events that that once the dust settles, that everyone just has to get back to normal way of life. But I mean, the reality is how can you get back to life? How can you just go back to work or to? I mean, I've just lost my mum, as most people know, and to lose a family member is cruel. It's painful. But she wasn't kind of taken from me, just like that. She wasn't, I knew she was ill, I expected it. You put yourself in the situation of one of those families who had little children who got killed in Manchester. To send your child to a concert and for them not to come home is, to me, that's a deal breaker, and that's something which changed the dynamics of how the people started to think, and it's almost created an uprising. It's created an uprising because we've all got children, or a high percentage of us have got children. A high percentage of us don't want to live in fear, or to be in fear that our children might come to harm. And something has to be done.
But in reality, the government are doing a lot of things. They're putting laws in place. They are taking passports from people like Anjem Chowdhury, thrown into jail. What do you want them to do more? What is it you want? Do you want them to? What do you want? There's a lot of people on the watch list. Is there anything particular you would like to do?
Well, really, I mean, like I've said, it's going back to what's happened again. It's going back. I mean, they need to do more. They need to have more control over these people. They need to take tougher action. They need to get within the communities. They need to understand why these problems are happening. The government need to build relationships with these communities. I mean, I feel there's not integration in a lot of places in England. There's different communities who are segregated. There should be less segregation, more integration. There needs to be an acknowledgement, more of an acknowledgement that people can't just die. It's very frustrating because you've got people who are dying innocently, and more needs to be done. Every time these attacks happen, every time they happen, what you find is these are people that the security services were aware of, and that keeps coming to light again and again and again. Surely more needs to be done. Like I said, if it means putting more restrictions on these people and watch this, if it means that they have to have more reporting restrictions, if it means they have to go on tag, if it means that they need to be detained, the government should not be fearful of kind of upsetting people or communities. It's about protection at the end of the day, and they need to protect the people. And like I said, when these events happen, there's a big furore. There's a big kind of circus around. We're going to do this, Cobra meetings and this and that. But then once it all goes away, it's all good and well putting extra 50,000, 100,000 police on the street for a week. But after that, we have to just get on with it, and it just feels that there's a root of the problem. And like I said, stripping it back, going back, even if they go into schools and make children more aware, in different communities, make them aware of the kind of the risks and the dangers of getting involved in terrorism and stuff. Strip it right back. Strip it right back. That's the approach, I think.
How are the clubs reacting to this?
Well, at the minute, the clubs themselves aren't really involved. It's the fan groups that are associated to the clubs.
Yeah, but has there been any comments, any reaction from any other clubs that the fans are doing this?
No, not yet, because the first march went pretty much under the radar. The first march was kind of unnoticed a little bit. The media probably weren't aware of it, and if they were, they didn't report on it. There was other marches in London that day. At the time, I was quite happy that there was other marches, because that meant that it took a lot of the kind of opposition away from us, because people shouldn't oppose us. There's no reason to oppose us. We're just fighting against extremism, nothing else, nothing more. We would like more acknowledgement from the clubs. Obviously, there might be a fear at the minute from these clubs that they've got their brand and that they don't want to be associated with this. But further down the line, we would like more acknowledgement. We are starting to kind of work with sports people, with some boxers. Some people aren't as high profile at the minute, but we're having discussions with other people about how we can get some people who are in the sporting world on board to promote the FLA and to get the word out there. And once it starts creeping into the mainstream press, and whilst we keep it in the right vein, then it can be a success. We need to keep to our ethos. I mean, we've got a policy of no violence, no racism. We want to make sure it's a peaceful movement. We want to make sure that we're not kind of singling out people because of race or colour. That will lose us people. That will not gain support. And what we want to do is gain support and get momentum and keep this momentum going.
Speaking of the clubs, their brands, you're making flags with the FLA, with whatever club wants to get a flag. It says FLA, then you got the club crests. Do you think they'll allow you guys to bring them into the stadium? Normally they don't really accept politics in stadiums.
Well, it's difficult really, because it's like borderline. At the minute, we're trying not to be seen as a political movement. I mean, as far as we're going to go in a minute will be to create petitions around weaknesses in law. We're working with a few solicitors to try and look at the terror laws to see where we could potentially make a case to government to hear our debate. If we get over 100,000 signatures, they will have to debate our petition in the House of Commons. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we're trying to keep this as sterile as possible, trying to keep it as neutral as possible. We're just trying to really to say, look, we're just a group of people who are representing the nation. We are football supporters, but we're passionate, and that's what we're doing, is demonstrating a passion that we want challenge. Basically, we want challenge. We want an end to all this. We want an acknowledgement. We want the people. We want the working class, non-working class, working class. We want normal people to be able to be recognised and to be their march, their statement to be acknowledged, and more action really. And another thing as well, I've read a lot of articles about families not being supported. We really, as the FLA, want to make sure that the families, the victims, their parents, and anyone impacted is looked after and supported. Not just in the months leading after the event, but it's a scar on their life. It's something they'll never forget.
You can have another march. There's going to be, maybe, who knows, there might be people from the Anti-Fascist Action trying to get to you. You have some heartmen amongst you. Do you think you can keep this from turning violent when it becomes bigger and bigger? It's all about the message and the ethos. Obviously, I'm fully aware that other groups that have gone by have kind of had difficulties as their movements have grown. When something grows, it becomes harder to manage. When a business grows, it becomes harder to manage. So our approach would be to resource it appropriately, to make sure we have sufficient stewards and security, to make sure we have sufficient admin, people who can support the movement, to make sure that it keeps along the same lines as what it started out as. The important thing is to try and, some people don't like this, but to try and work with these groups to make a clear case that we aren't fascists. We are just people who have an opinion, who would like change. People were talking about bringing their families on these marches. People were talking about bringing their children. Now, if you think that these are people who want violence, then these people who are opposing this really need to take a good look at themselves, because I would argue that they're extremists. What they probably are if they're arguing against the fact that we're challenging killing of innocent people. Yeah, you said you're not fascist, you're not right wing. Det han siger er, at de er jo ikke højreorienterede, de er ikke fascister. En gruppe, der hedder Hope Not Hate, som er en venstreorienteret bevægelse, der overvåger højrefløjen i England, har selv været ude at sige, at de ikke betragter FLA som højrefløjsfolk, og det er normalt så er de ret hurtige til at kalde forskellige bevægelser for højrefløj. Så det er egentlig ret interessant. But at the end here, are you worried that right-wing groups might try and infiltrate and kind of take over?
Sorry, say that again?
Are you worried that right-wing groups might try and infiltrate and try to take over?
Well, you know what? Actually, I've put a lot of thought to this.
In the group of that many people, there must be people with those opinions.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Within each football group, within each football supporters group, there will be people who have extreme views. There will be people who just want to ban, certain people from being in this country. Just have a vendetta against certain people of certain faiths. But what you've got with the FLA is slightly different to other groups, is that you've got a larger following from each group. So what you've almost got a small percentage, I would say, of people who you deem maybe extreme, and a higher percentage of people who are just everyday people who go football, but they just want change. I've met with some Birmingham City guys yesterday who come down to lay a wreath on London Bridge, and that's been a common theme. That's another thing. I mean, since we've done the march on the 24th, we've had Leeds, Leicester City, Birmingham, and some other clubs come down. Spurs have laid wreaths. That's with the Portsmouth, West Ham, the other guys. But what I'm trying to get at is I lost my train of thought.
All these groups are coming together. You mentioned to me Birmingham City, you were kind of saying hooliganism's kind of on the down anyway. What's the deal? Is there a notion that maybe this could bring people so much together that they kind of give up fighting?
Well, yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on it earlier. At the end of the day, football hooliganism is on the decline. I think what I was trying to get at a minute ago was that there's people who, for example, Birmingham City, the Zulus, who what they're known as their hardcore group, they've got a lot of a big black following, and a lot of them were sceptical about coming on the first match because of the kind of notion that it might be a far right group. It might, it could go down that way. But what I'm starting to see is a lot of these people are coming forward, which with a lot of these far right groups they wouldn't come forward because it's seen as a far right group. Because we're not a far right group, we're getting people of all faiths, people of all colours coming forward, which is, it gives us more of an identity, it gives us more credibility. I mean, our identity is mass numbers of people, peaceful movement, but we then become credible because people can't just say it was predominantly white, and people stereotype it, people try to frame it, try to give it that kind of, this is a far right group, but the reality is all we are is people, and we're in mass numbers. So it's full of energy, full of positivity, and people there seems to be a buzz about it. And it's what's needed.
Thank you, John, for meeting us.
Cheers. Thanks.
That is all from this podcast about the FLA. I do hope to bring you more podcasts in the future in English. You can check www.nordicbetblog.dk for more info. Press the little tab called podcast for, the podcast. And that's all from me, Tom Carstensen, in London. Thank you for listening.